The day started like any other Tuesday. Marcus Chen was in his driveway, pressure washing his truck, when he heard the sound, that particular screech of tires that makes your stomach drop. A sharp crunch followed, so violent the pavement beneath his feet seemed to shudder. He didn't see the car coming. The red BMW M440i burst through his garage wall like it was paper, sending bricks and mortar exploding across his workshop. Marcus dove backward, nearly falling into his own truck bed. The car's front end embedded, itself halfway through the opening, the engine still running, tires spinning against the concrete floor, grinding away chunks of his foundation. For 3 full seconds, nothing happened. Then silence. The car's engine cut out. Marcus stood there, his pressure washer still running in his hand, water cascading harmlessly onto the ground. He couldn't process what he was seeing. His garage, the one he'd renovated himself over 5 years, was now decorated with a luxury sedan. The driver's door opened. Out climbed a boy who couldn't have been more than 17, his hands shaking so violently his phone nearly slipped from his grip. His face was white, all the blood drained from it. He was wearing a designer tracksuit and had the look of someone experiencing his first real consequence in his entire life. "Oh my God," the kid whispered. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I was just, the pedal, I thought it was—" "You thought the gas pedal was the brake," Marcus finished flatly. Not a question. "Yeah." The boy's voice cracked. "Yeah, I just got my license. I was just trying to back out of the driveway and—" "Your driveway?" Marcus looked at the BMW, then at the crater in his garage. The structural integrity of an entire wall was compromised. He could see into his garage from the street now. His tools, his workbench, everything exposed. "This isn't your driveway, kid." "I know, my mom's house is 2 blocks over and I panicked. I came here because—" The boy's eyes were filling with tears. "Because I don't know what to do. I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry." Marcus felt the anger building in his chest like heat behind glass. He'd worked construction for 20 years. He'd put every penny into this property. The garage was his sanctuary, his escape, the one place that was entirely his. "What's your name?" Marcus asked, keeping his voice steady. Tyler Morrison." "Well, Tyler Morrison, we're going to need to call the police and your parents. My homeowner's insurance is going to need a report, and someone's going to need to pay for this." Marcus gestured at the wreckage. "Do you understand?" Tyler nodded miserably, already dialing his phone. "Hi, Mom?" "Yeah, so. Something bad happened." Karen Morrison arrived 17 minutes later in a white Range Rover, her tires actually squealing. As she pulled into the driveway, apparently reckless driving ran in the family. She was in her mid-50s, dressed immaculately in athleisure wear and oversized sunglasses despite the overcast afternoon. Her blonde hair was blow-dried to perfection. She looked like she'd come from a Pilates class to handle a minor inconvenience, not to manage her son's destruction of someone else's property. "Tyler!" she shrieked, running to her son and pulling him into a hug. "Oh my God, are you okay? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Mom, but thank God." She turned to Marcus, her face shifting from concerned mother to something colder, more calculating. "Hi there, Karen Morrison, I'm Tyler's mother. Look, I know this looks bad, but these things happen. Kids make mistakes." Marcus had the insurance adjuster on the phone. He held up a finger. "Give me 1 second, ma'am." He finished explaining the situation to the adjuster, gave his address, and confirmed they'd send someone out tomorrow. Then he turned back to Karen. "The wall's going to need structural assessment," he said. "I'm looking at probably $15,000 to $20,000 in repairs, plus the damage to my garage interior, my tools, possibly foundation work. My homeowner's policy has a $1,500 deductible." Karen's expression didn't change, but her hand moved to her sunglasses, pushing them up onto her head. Her eyes were sharp, predatory. "Well," she said slowly, "I'm sure your insurance will cover most of that." "Some of it," Marcus corrected. Not all of it. Your son caused this damage. Your insurance needs to handle it. Of course. Karen was already pulling out her phone. I'll call our insurance company right now and... Mom, Tyler interrupted quietly. I told the guy that this was my fault. I told him I accelerated instead of braking. Karen's head snapped toward her son. For just a moment, Marcus saw something flash across her face. A calculation, a reassessment. Then she smiled. A tight, thin thing that didn't reach her eyes. Sweetheart, why don't you go sit in the car for a minute? Let me talk to Mr. I'm sorry, what's your name? Marcus. Marcus Chen. Mr. Chen. She waited until Tyler had trudged back to the Range Rover before she stepped closer to Marcus, lowering her voice. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. We're going through some things financially right now. My husband's business took a hit during the pandemic. Insurance is expensive. If this goes through our claim, our rates are going to skyrocket. We're already struggling. Marcus stared at her. Your son drove through my house. I understand that. But you seem like a reasonable man. What if we work something out? Off the books? Maybe a payment plan? I could give you a few thousand now and the rest over time. Cash. No insurance company, no claims adjusters, no... No, Marcus said flatly. That's not how this works. This is how insurance works. This is how responsibility works. Karen's face hardened. The mask slipped for just a second, and Marcus saw the real her, angry, entitled, used to getting her way. You know what? She said coldly. That's fine, but don't expect us to make this easy on you. We have excellent legal representation. Tyler's a minor. We have witnesses who say our car was parked on our property. If you want to make this a problem, we can make it much bigger. Before Marcus could respond, she turned on her heel and walked back to her Range Rover. She pulled out her phone, made a call, and spoke quietly but intensely into it. Through the windshield, Marcus could see her pointing at his garage, at him, while Tyler stared down at his lap. Then Karen reversed the Range Rover back down the driveway with as much aggression as her son had driven the BMW, nearly hitting a landscaper's truck parked on the street. Marcus stood alone in his driveway, looking at the destroyed garage wall. He'd just made a powerful enemy. The insurance adjuster arrived the next morning and did a full assessment. The damage was worse than Marcus had initially thought. The wall's structural integrity was compromised, the electrical system needed inspection, 3 of his tools had been crushed, and the concrete floor was cracked in multiple places. The initial estimate came to $24,300. When the adjuster asked about the vehicle's policy, Marcus provided the BMW's information. He'd written down the license plate number on the night of the incident, a habit from years of construction work where you never knew when details mattered. This will be straightforward, the adjuster said. We contact their insurance pays. You pay your deductible, we handle the rest. Should take a few weeks. It didn't take a few weeks. 2 days later, Marcus received a call from Karen's insurance company. They weren't going to be paying. According to their records, the BMW wasn't registered to the Morrisons' residence. The vehicle was registered to a business entity called Morrison Holdings, LLC, and at the time of the incident, it wasn't parked on Morrison property, it was parked at a rental home 1 block away that they'd let a friend use for the weekend. So you're saying the vehicle wasn't on the registered property? The insurance representative explained with the tone of someone who'd delivered this bad news 100 times. According to their policy, incidents that occur while the vehicle is away from the stated residence have different coverage. In this case, there's a dispute as to whether the vehicle was being operated with permission, what the purpose was, and whether a 17-year-old drove it, Marcus interrupted. The purpose doesn't matter. He crashed it into my garage. Yes, sir. But because the vehicle was registered to a business entity and there are questions about whether the minor was the owner of the vehicle or operating it as a family member. Marcus hung up. He called his own insurance company back. They were sympathetic but firm. Without clear liability from the other party's insurance, they would need to go through his own coverage, and he'd need to pay his deductible. They'd investigate further, but these things took time. 3 weeks passed. Marcus spent them calling insurance companies, lawyers, and the police department. The police report listed the incident as an accident. No citations issued because Tyler was on his family's property. But the property question was murky now. Karen and her lawyers had deliberately created ambiguity. The BMW's registration, the rental house, the business entity, it was a web designed to confuse liability. Then, on a Friday morning, a letter arrived at his house. It was from a law firm, Morrison & Associates Legal Defense. Dear Mr. Chen, we represent Karen Morrison regarding the incident at your residence on date. Our clients deny liability for the damages you've claimed. The vehicle in question was parked on private property with the owner's permission. The incident occurred as a result of operator error by a minor who was permitted by the property owner to operate said vehicle. Our clients have no obligation to cover damages resulting from an accident involving operator error. Furthermore, we wish to inform you that we are aware of your attempts to circumvent the insurance claim process through direct settlement negotiations. Any further contact with our clients or attempts at coercion will be considered harassment and will be addressed accordingly. We trust this matter will be resolved through proper legal channels. Regards. Patricia Hines. Escort Marcus read the letter 3 times, his hands shaking with fury. They were lying. The vehicle was registered to their business. Tyler was their son. The rental house had been their rental. They were deliberately using legal machinery to dodge responsibility. He called a personal injury attorney. The attorney, a sharp woman named Susan Reeves, listened to his story, asked some questions, and then gave him the truth he didn't want to hear. Here's the problem, she said. The Morrisons have created a technical liability shield. The vehicle is registered to a business entity. The business entity has different insurance coverage than a personal vehicle, because the minor was technically operating a vehicle. That wasn't their property, it was their parents' business property. There's a legitimate gray area about whether standard homeowners insurance even applies. That's bullshit, Marcus said. It is, Susan agreed. But it's legal bullshit. And it's also very expensive bullshit to fight. We could take them to civil court, but you're looking at legal fees north of $10,000 and they'll drag this out for years. They're clearly willing to play hardball. So they just win? Not necessarily. But you need to understand what you're up against. The Morrisons have resources. They have legal representation specifically designed to handle situations like this. You have a destroyed garage and a deductible. Do you want to spend $30,000 in 2 years fighting for $24,000 in damages? Marcus didn't answer. Here's what I'd recommend, Susan continued. Give me a week. I'm going to make some calls, do some real digging. Sometimes people like this have a pattern. Sometimes there's leverage you don't know about, Marcus agreed, thanked her, and hung up. He stood in his ruined garage, looking at the wall that was still partially caved in, and felt something crystallize inside him, something cold and determined. The Morrisons thought they could use the system against him. They thought that money and lawyers were the same as being right. They thought consequences were things that happened to other people. Marcus had always believed in doing things the right way. But the right way wasn't working, and he was about to learn that sometimes the best way to fight the system is to understand it better than the people you're fighting. His phone buzzed. A text from Susan. Call me. I found something. Susan Reeves's office was on the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise. She had a panoramic view of the city, and the kind of minimalist decor that suggested she billed by the hour, because every object in here was expensive and justified. Close the door, she said when Marcus arrived. I need to tell you something off the record first. Marcus sat down across from her desk. I made some calls, Susan said. I know some people in the legal community. The Morrisons, or more specifically Karen Morrison, has a history. Your situation isn't unique. She opened a file on her computer and turned the monitor toward him. 5 years ago, Karen's husband, Robert Morrison, was involved in a hit-and-run. Drunk driving. He hit a parked car. The other driver tried to press charges, but Robert's legal team fought it hard. Eventually, it got settled quietly. The details are sealed. Susan clicked to another document. 3 years ago, their daughter, Karen's stepdaughter, was involved in an incident at a nightclub. Another young woman was injured. Nothing was prosecuted, but money changed hands. Again, details sealed. She clicked again. And 18 months ago, One of their employees at Morrison Holdings filed a complaint with the Department of Labor alleging wage theft and hostile work environment. The complaint was dropped after a settlement. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that the Morrisons have a pattern of using legal machinery and financial resources to make their problems disappear. But here's the thing, and this is important. They do it by making problems disappear quietly. They settle things. They silence people. The moment you stop playing the game by their rules and start making noise, they're not as powerful." "What kind of noise?" Susan smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. The kind that can't be silenced with a legal letter. The kind that lawyers can't fix. Over the next hour, Susan laid out a strategy that was entirely legal but brutally effective. She explained how Marcus could file a small claims court case, small enough that Karen would have to appear herself, or at least send someone to represent her. Once there was a legal judgment, he could pursue a judgment lien against the Morrison property. Meanwhile, she would file a complaint with the state insurance commissioner regarding potential insurance fraud and misrepresentation on the Morrison policy. She'd also file a request with the court for discovery, meaning Karen and her lawyers would have to produce documents, emails, anything related to how the vehicle was registered and insured. "Discovery is the nuclear option," Susan explained, "because we get to see everything. Every email between Karen and her lawyers, every internal discussion about how to structure the liability claim, all of it. And once we have that in discovery, it becomes part of the public record. So what? She'll settle? Probably. Because the alternative is having all her dirty laundry become part of a public court file. And once it's public, I can tell you from experience, the media loves this stuff. You've got a working-class homeowner versus a wealthy woman with a history of making problems disappear using legal maneuvering. That's a story." Marcus felt the weight of what she was suggesting. "You're talking about destroying her." "I'm talking about leverage," Susan corrected. "She has it with money and lawyers. We have it with truth and attention. The question is whether you're willing to use it." Marcus thought about his garage. He thought about Karen's cold voice on his driveway. He thought about her deliberately structuring lies around a technical legal framework. "Do it," he said. The small claims court appearance was scheduled for 6 weeks later, but the real action started the moment the discovery request was filed. Karen's legal team immediately moved to have the discovery request limited. But the judge, a meticulous woman named Patricia Holloway, who clearly had no patience for legal theater, overruled them. Full discovery was granted. Within 2 weeks, emails started flowing into Susan's office. They were damning. In one email chain between Karen and her lawyer, Patricia Hines, Karen asked, "Can we make the business entity registration thing work to our advantage?" Patricia had responded, "It's a technical shield. The policy is ambiguous. We can argue either way, but I suspect they won't have the resources to fight." In another email, Karen had written, "Robert says just let it drag on. Make it expensive for them. Eventually, they'll give up." In a third, dated the day after the incident, Karen had emailed a colleague. "The kid's lucky I know how to handle these situations. Most people just accept legal bullshit." The emails revealed a calculated strategy, lie through technical maneuvering, exhaust the other party, and settle quietly before the truth became too public. Susan sent the emails to Marcus with a note. "We have them." Karen folded exactly 3 days later. Her lawyers called Susan and asked for a settlement meeting. What had been a dispute over $24,000 suddenly became very simple. Karen agreed to pay all damages plus legal fees. The total came to $38,000, but there was one condition that Susan insisted on, a public statement. "No," Karen's lawyer said immediately. "Absolutely not." "Then the discovery goes public," Susan replied. "Those emails you've been desperately trying to keep sealed? They become part of the public record. Every reporter in this city has been monitoring this case. The moment those emails are filed, they're getting copies." There was silence on the phone. "What does she want the statement to say?" Karen's lawyer finally asked. Susan handed Marcus the phone. For the first time, he got to speak directly to the woman who'd tried to destroy him. "I want you to acknowledge that your son caused the damage," Marcus said. "I want you to acknowledge that you attempted to evade responsibility. And I want you to apologize." Karen's voice when she spoke was controlled but barely. You have no idea what you've started here. Actually, Marcus said, I think I do. The same thing you started when you drove through my garage and then decided lying was easier than owning up to it. The public statement was released 2 days later through Karen's lawyer's office. Morrison Holdings LLC and Karen Morrison acknowledged responsibility for damages to the property of Marcus Chen resulting from an incident involving a vehicle registered to Morrison Holdings. Ms. Morrison and her family regret that they initially sought to dispute liability through legal maneuvering rather than addressing the matter directly. The matter has been resolved. Ms. Morrison offers her sincere apologies to Mr. Chen and his family. It wasn't everything Marcus wanted to hear, but it was close enough. The local news picked it up, small enough for the evening news, but big enough to make Karen's social circle uncomfortable. One reporter dug into the pattern, the hit and run, the settlement at the nightclub, the employee complaint. By the next morning, there was a headline: Local business owner's daughter settled wage theft complaint. New legal questions arise. Karen's name was in the article. Her business was named. Her pattern was documented. Marcus watched from his driveway as the contractors arrived to begin reconstruction on his garage. They'd start with the foundation, move to the wall, and finish with the interior. The work would take 2 months. By then, Karen Morrison would be something else, not a villain in Marcus Chen's story, but a cautionary tale in her own. The repair work on Marcus's garage took exactly 8 weeks. During that time, the story took on a life of its own. A journalist named David Kim, who worked for a metropolitan newspaper, had read the initial report about the Morrison settlement. Something about it bothered him, the way it was too neat, too quick. He started digging. He filed public records requests. He talked to people in the Morrisons' business circles. What he found was a pattern spanning 20 years. Morrison Holdings had been involved in multiple employment disputes, all settled with non-disclosure agreements. There were whispers about Robert Morrison's behavior at social events, incidents that were always quietly managed. There was a history of real estate disputes, neighbor complaints that mysteriously vanished, contractor conflicts that ended in settlements rather than lawsuits. It wasn't that the Morrisons were uniquely evil. It was that they'd never had to face consequences. Every time something went wrong, money and lawyers made it disappear. They'd built an entire life around the assumption that they existed above normal accountability, and then they met Marcus Chen, who called a lawyer instead of accepting their first offer. David Kim's piece ran as a Sunday feature, How Wealth and Legal Maneuvering Created a Culture of Impunity Inside the World of the Morrison Family. It was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, not sensational, but thoroughly documented. Every claim was sourced. Every incident was verified. The piece included interviews with former employees, people who'd had disputes with the Morrisons, lawyers who'd watched their tactics across multiple cases. The article made one central argument, that the legal system, as currently structured, allowed wealthy people to weaponize it against ordinary people, and that systemic change required both individual accountability and journalistic scrutiny. Karen Morrison's name appeared on the front page of the Sunday paper. The consequences were immediate and cascading. Within 2 days, 3 major clients of Morrison Holdings announced they were severing their business relationships. One put out an official statement. We can no longer partner with a company whose values don't align with our own commitment to accountability and ethical behavior. Within a week, the city councilwoman for Karen's district called for an investigation into whether Morrison Holdings had improperly influenced previous city contracts through informal settlements rather than legal accountability. Within 2 weeks, Karen received a letter from the State Bar Association. They'd received multiple complaints regarding her legal team's handling of discovery requests and whether there had been deliberate misrepresentation of vehicle ownership during the insurance claim process. They were opening an investigation. Patricia Hines, Karen's lawyer, requested a meeting with the Bar Association. She came prepared to defend her actions as aggressive but legal representation. But the evidence was damning. Emails showed she'd advised deliberately structuring the liability claim to exploit technical loopholes. She'd suggested that the discovery requests could be buried in legal procedure because the plaintiff likely wouldn't have resources to fight. She was sanctioned. Not disbarred, not yet, but sanctioned. A public record of her ethical violation. Marcus watched from his newly rebuilt garage as the dominoes continued to fall. He received a call from Susan Reeves, the Morrisons. "House is being reassessed," she said. "Property values dropped about 12% since the story broke. People don't want to live near them anymore." "Jesus," Marcus said. "There's more. Their country club has asked them to resign their membership to maintain a positive community relationship. They're trying to spin it as a mutual decision, but club members are confirming it was involuntary." Marcus didn't feel triumphant. He felt something more complex. Vindicated, yes, but also unsettled by how completely the destruction was. "Karen wants to meet," Susan said. "She called me directly. Not her lawyer, her. She wants to talk to you. Why?" "I think she wants to ask you to make it stop. They met at a coffee shop, neutral territory." Karen looked diminished. She'd aged a decade in 2 months. Her hair was still perfect, but her eyes were hollow. She wore large sunglasses despite the indoor lighting, and she ordered coffee she didn't drink. "I don't know what you want," she said without preamble, "but it has to stop. Robert's having panic attacks. Tyler won't leave the house. My business partners are talking about dissolving the company. I've lost clients. My daughter is getting threats at school. How much further do you want to push this?" Marcus looked at her. He remembered her face on his driveway, the contempt in her voice, the assumption that she could intimidate him into accepting her terms. "I didn't push anything past getting a fair settlement," he said quietly. "David Kim did the investigation independently. The state bar opened their own inquiry. That's not on me. That's consequences. That's how it's supposed to work when someone breaks the rules." "We broke the rules?" Karen laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Everyone breaks the rules. Everyone. We just did it openly enough to get caught. Do you have any idea how many people with money handle things exactly the way we did? We just happened to get in a newspaper. Do you know what that makes us? Unlucky. Not criminals. Unlucky. You drove through my garage and then tried to destroy me to avoid paying for it," Marcus said. "That's not luck. That's choice." Karen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. "I have a daughter, Marcus. A stepdaughter, technically, but she's mine. She's 8 years old. She goes to a very good school, or she did. Now other parents are asking that she be removed because of what my family has done. She's 8. What's her crime? What did she do wrong except share a last name?" Marcus felt that complex tangle inside him again, vindication and guilt at once. "I didn't do anything to hurt your daughter," he said. "But you did," Karen replied. "Not directly, but you did. You made my name toxic. You made it so that anything attached to Morrison is poisoned. That's not justice. That's revenge. That's consequence," Marcus said. "Which you said everyone deserves except you." Karen stood up. Her hands were shaking. "I hope the money is worth it," she said. "I hope sleeping well at night is worth the collateral damage." She left her untouched coffee and walked out of the cafe. Marcus sat alone at the table for a long time. That night, he couldn't sleep. He wasn't thinking about Karen anymore. He was thinking about her 8-year-old stepdaughter, removed from her school because of her family name. He was thinking about Tyler, traumatized and afraid to leave his house. He was thinking about Robert Morrison, having panic attacks in a business that had become toxic. He'd wanted justice. He'd wanted fairness. He'd wanted the system to work. It had worked. But the mechanism of its working had ground through people he'd never intended to target. He called Susan Reeves at 10 o'clock at night. "I want to make a statement," he said. "A public statement before this gets worse." "What kind of statement?" "One that says the financial matter is resolved and that I believe the appropriate consequences have been delivered. That I don't want the cycle to continue." "Marcus, do it," he said. "Tomorrow." The statement was brief. "I want to clarify that the damage to my property has been fully compensated by the Morrison family. I pursued accountability through legal means, and I believe that accountability has been achieved. I understand there are consequences beyond what I intended or desired. I would respectfully ask that people allow this matter to reach its conclusion. The appropriate legal and professional reviews are underway. Continued public pressure serves no further justice. It only extends pain to families, all families, who are trying to move forward. The statement was received with mixed reactions. Some in the media saw it as a betrayal of the broader justice narrative. Others praised his compassion. Some saw it as weakness, but it did have an effect. The story lost momentum. News cycles of news began to push it aside. The Morrisons' public humiliation didn't evaporate, but it stopped getting worse. 3 months later, Marcus was in his garage, fully rebuilt now. Better than before, when there was a knock on the door frame. It was Tyler. He'd clearly been working up the courage to come. His hands were jammed in his pockets and his face was flushed. "Hi," Tyler said. "I know I probably shouldn't be here." Your mom knows?" Marcus interrupted. "Yeah. She doesn't want me to, but I'm 18 now, and Tyler took a breath. "I needed to say this. In person. I needed you to know that I understand what I did wasn't just to you. I understand that that we handled it wrong. And I understand that whatever consequences we're facing, we earned them." Marcus studied the kid. He wasn't the same person who'd stumbled out of a wrecked BMW, pale and terrified. This version had something different in his eyes, not fear, but actual accountability. "That took courage," Marcus said. "I'm going to community college," Tyler continued. "I'm going to study to be a paralegal, actually. I want to help people navigate legal stuff without having to be destroyed by lawyers and systems designed to confuse them. He stopped. "I know it sounds stupid." "It doesn't," Marcus said. "It sounds like you're trying to do better." "I am." Marcus walked over to his workbench, the same one that had been buried under wall debris months ago. He picked up a piece of brick that he'd saved as a reminder. He handed it to Tyler. "Keep this," he said. "Not as punishment, as a reminder of what happens when you choose SPI." 6 months after the initial incident, Marcus Chen received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was handwritten on expensive paper in carefully precise cursive. The postmark was local. "Dear Marcus, I don't expect you to read past this first line. But if you're reading this, I want to say something I couldn't say in that coffee shop. I'm sorry. Not for the consequences, those are deserved. But I'm sorry for who I became in the process of avoiding them. I'm sorry for assuming I could manipulate my way out of responsibility. I'm sorry for teaching my son that there were systems designed specifically so people like us didn't have to follow the same rules. I've been in therapy since this started. My therapist, a woman who actually doesn't charge for emergency sessions when you're having panic attacks in her parking lot, suggested I might be what's called a high-functioning narcissist. Apparently, it's common among people who've never experienced real consequences. You build a life around the assumption that everything can be managed: money, reputation, people. You stop seeing people as people and start seeing them as problems to be solved. I saw you as a problem to be solved. You responded by treating me like a person who needed to be held accountable. It's taken me 6 months to understand why that feels so much worse than anything financial. Robert has been to treatment for his drinking. Tyler is doing genuinely well in community college. He told me about the brick, about what you said. My stepdaughter is adjusting to her new school. We'll never fully recover from what this period cost us, but we're moving forward. I've been thinking about what you said about everyone breaking the rules. That's true. But here's what I've learned. Most people break rules because they're desperate, or they've rationalized it, or they didn't understand the consequences. I broke the rules because I assumed I was exempt from consequences. That's a different category of rule breaking. That's the kind that poisons everything around you. The money you receive doesn't balance the scales. But my hope is that what you did, pursuing accountability genuinely and refusing to let a system designed to protect the wealthy protect me, sends a message. Maybe to others like me. Maybe to people who watch this story and see someone choosing to use the system against the system, not for revenge, but for justice. I know I'm not redeemed. I'm not sure redemption is something you get for behavior like mine, but I'm different. And I think that matters. If you're willing, I'd like to meet again. Not to apologize again, I think I've done enough apologizing. But to talk about something concrete, I want to fund a legal aid clinic in your neighborhood. Somewhere people without resources can get representation without worrying about being destroyed by people with resources. I want to do that in perpetuity. It won't be my name on it, obviously. But I want to spend the money I made weaponizing the legal system on making it accessible to people like you. If you want nothing to do with me, I understand completely. I'll fund the clinic anyway. But I thought you should know. Karen Marcus read the letter 3 times. He sat on his porch with it, watching the street, thinking. He called Susan Reeves. Does she mean it? He asked. I don't know her well enough to say, Susan replied carefully. But I know someone who has access to her finances. Give me 2 hours. 2 hours later, Susan called back. She's liquidating assets, Susan said. Not all of them. She still needs to live. But she's serious. She's already hired someone to set up a nonprofit. She's serious about this. Marcus had never been someone who believed in redemption stories. He believed in consequences. He believed in accountability. But he was starting to understand that there might be something beyond that, something that wasn't redemption but was close. Genuine change. He called Karen. The offer about the clinic, he said when she picked up. I want to meet about it. Okay. Her voice was careful, hopeful, guarded. But I want one other thing. What? I want you to volunteer there. For 1 year minimum. I want you to sit in those offices and listen to people who can't afford lawyers. I want you to see what the system looks like from their side, not your side. There was a long pause. Yes, Karen said finally. Yes, I'll do that. The Marcus Chen Legal Aid Clinic opened 2 years later. It occupied the ground floor of a building in an underserved neighborhood. It was staffed by lawyers who donated their time and law school students who needed the experience. It served people who were being evicted, people who'd been injured and couldn't afford representation, people who were facing consequences and had no one to help them navigate the system. Karen volunteered as an intake coordinator. She spent 4 days a week listening to people's stories, helping them fill out paperwork, directing them to resources. It was unglamorous work. It was humbling work. It was work she'd never have done if consequences hadn't forced her toward it. Marcus didn't become friends with Karen. Some wounds take longer to heal than others, and some relationships are simply incompatible with actual closeness, but they reached something like mutual respect. They understood each other in a way that wouldn't have been possible if one of them had been allowed to escape without facing what they'd done. 3 years after the initial incident, Tyler Morrison graduated from community college with a paralegal degree. His thesis work was on how legal systems disproportionately protect wealthy defendants through technical maneuvering, and how reform could address those issues. One of his professors, impressed by the work, asked if Tyler had ever considered law school. Maybe, Tyler said. But first, I want to work at the clinic. I want to help people who can't afford lawyers. My mom did something wrong a few years ago. It took consequences to make her understand that. I want to help other people avoid the choice she made, or help them navigate it if they make the wrong choice anyway. Tyler started working at the clinic. Marcus trained him in how to talk to clients, how to gather information, how to understand their problems. Tyler was good at it. He had empathy that seemed genuine, hard-won through the experience of watching his family's destruction and choosing something different. 5 years after the BMW crashed through his garage wall, Marcus stood in his reconstructed space and thought about the journey that had brought him here. He'd wanted justice. He'd gotten it. But justice, he'd learned, was like a stone thrown into water. It created ripples that extended far beyond the point of impact. He'd hurt Karen Morrison. Not just financially, but psychologically, fundamentally. He'd contributed to the public destruction of her reputation. He'd caused pain to people who hadn't made the initial choice to wrong him. Her daughter, her stepdaughter, her husband in his own damaged way, but he'd also, through the mechanism of pursuing accountability, created something. The legal aid clinic existed now. Tyler Morrison was training people how to navigate a system that had nearly crushed them. Karen Morrison was spending her days listening to people she would have dismissed 5 years ago, and in the process, she was genuinely changing. Was that redemption? Marcus wasn't sure. He still didn't believe in redemption, not exactly. He believed in consequence and change. He believed in systems being held accountable. He believed that justice, pursued genuinely, was worth the collateral damage it sometimes caused. But he also believed now in something he hadn't before, that people could change. That consequences applied with intention could transform someone. That there was a space between forgiveness and permanent condemnation where humans could actually evolve. The letter that finally put the whole story to rest came 3 years after the clinic opened. It was another handwritten note from Karen. "Dear Marcus, I'm writing to tell you that I'm stepping down from the clinic. Not because I'm running away, I'm committed to this work for life, but because I've been recruited to work on state-level legal reform. I'm going to be advising a commission on how to address the technical loopholes that allowed me to evade accountability for so long. It's ironic, isn't it? The woman who weaponized legal systems is now working to make them more just. I'm not going to pretend this is redemption. I don't think I'm redeemed, but I'm different. And I think that's what matters. I'm different because someone held me accountable. Because someone didn't accept the system as it was designed and instead demanded better. You did that. You forced me to see myself clearly, and you did it through persistence and integrity rather than revenge. I want to say thank you. I know that's probably not what you expected to read, but thank you for not destroying me when you could have. Thank you for pursuing consequences instead of vengeance. Thank you for creating space for change. My kids see me differently now. My husband is sober. My business is gone, but I have meaningful work. None of that would have happened if you'd accepted my first offer or gone away quietly. You taught me that consequences are a gift, that they're the only real path to change. I'm grateful for that, even though it took years for me to understand it." Karen Marcus stood in his garage, reading the letter for the last time. He'd kept all of them, the threatening legal notices, the letters from the insurance companies, the discovery documents, and finally, these letters of transformation. His garage was no longer a place of trauma. It was simply a place where he worked, where he'd rebuilt his sense of order and peace after it had been shattered by a moment of teenage carelessness and adult entitlement. Through the window, he could see the street beyond, the neighborhood he'd pee,